Hey there, CJ students. Welcome to classwork homework 8.1, populations and samples. This unit's going to be on statistics. So today we're going to figure out kind of how populations and samples will help us with statistics. So to start off, a subset is a word that tells us that we're looking at just a part of an entire group. Okay, so if I say a subset of a population, we're just looking at a part of that population. So if we take a look at these three categories, the alphabet, the number system, and shapes, we can write down different subsets. For example, for the alphabet, we can have vowels, A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y, and consonants, right? Those are different subsets of the alphabets. For the number system, we can have integers, whole numbers, rational numbers, right? Decimals, fractions, those are rational numbers. Whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Integers, -3, -2, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And finally, for shapes, to name a few, we could have quadrilaterals, any four-sided shape, triangles, three-sided shapes, polygons, right, any shapes more than four sides, right? So when collecting data, a subset is called a sample, okay? So vowels would be a sample of the alphabet, consonants would be a sample of the alphabet, while the entire set is referred to the population. So the population would be the entire alphabet. The sample would be vowels, or the sample would be consonants. Population would be the entire number system. The sample would be integers. The sample would be whole numbers. The sample would be rational numbers. Right? So let's take a look at the following statements in populations and figure out what a sample could be. So for people living in a specific neighborhood, if that's the entire population, a subset or sample could be all people under the age of 18. Right? For families with children, if we're talking about every family with children, a sample or subset could be families with just like one child. You could also do families with 2 children, families with 5 or more children. Those are all different samples, right? And for seniors at East High School, a sample could be all the people who play football, or all the people who play basketball, or all the seniors who are in the jazz band, right? Not every senior, but just the select few who are in that sample size. Right? So when a population is really large, it is often difficult or impractical to collect data from everybody. So in that case, we use what's called surveys. And a survey usually can be used on a sample of that population. Right? So let's go backwards. If we have sample sizes, what cookie do you think they actually, or sorry, what population do you think they actually represent? So one cookie from a batch of homemade, the population would be like the entire batch of cookies that you made, right? The sample, those who voted in the presidential election, the population would be the entire U.S. citizens of voting age, right? We didn't care if they voted for Trump or Hillary Clinton, right? Or we're talking about everyone who is eligible to vote, and maybe some people didn't even vote at all, okay? So if we collect data from an entire population, it is called a population statistics. The key word there being the entire population, everyone available. And data collected from a sample, just a small subset of a population, is called a sample statistic. So again, key word there being sample. If I just decide, you know what, I'm not going to survey the entire middle school. I'm only going to survey, a couple of 7th graders, a couple of 8th graders. Forget about the everybody else. That's a sample statistics. But if I want to say, you know what, no, everybody in the school is going to go ahead and vote on this, and I'm going to survey them, that's a population statistic. So for the remainder of class, what I want you to do is try and complete this organizer by answering the questions based on statistical questions. So for instance, what do the 7th grade students want to do for the fall festival? How could I collect that data? Well, I could survey the 7th grade students in first lunch, right? Now, if I surveyed only the 7th graders in first lunch, this would be an example of a sample statistics because I didn't get every 7th grader, right? And why? Because not every student was asked, right? If you asked every single person, right, then it was a population statistic. But oftentimes that's just not feasible, right? So we use sample surveys to represent everybody rather than trying to get a hold of everybody and get their opinion, okay? So let's do one more together. It says, what is the average grade on the semester exam in Mrs. Johnson's class? Well, I don't need to survey anybody here. I could just look at her grade book and use the scores in there. So is that a data population or a sample statistic? Well, everybody took the test, so that is a population statistic, right? We're not just looking at some of the scores. We're not just looking at the people who got, an A we're not just looking at the people who failed it, we're looking at everybody to come up with the average. And why? Because when looking at the average, every piece of data is used. Okay, we're going to go ahead and discuss the last two after you can finish them yourself. And on the back, real quick, here's what I want you to do with your homework. It says determine the population and sample in each problem. So you're going to tell me what the population is for the problem and what the sample is. So it says a survey of 2,541 American households discovered that 64% of the households own a car. So the population for that is the American households, right? Everybody that was surveyed in that. And the sample in that survey is simply the American households who only own a car, right? The subset. So everybody surveyed, that's your population, and the people who just own a car, your subset, that is your sample. Right? So you've got the rest, and it's a little bit different on the bottom. And then don't forget a problem in 11 and 12 where it asks you to define population, define a sample, and give examples. That's it. Call me if you have questions.